Yeah, let's talk Michigan football. So, yeah, Michigan football, I've talked about this before, kind of an interesting spot. Like, you talk about key playmakers back. Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Colston Loveland. It's an interesting position because you don't really see this too often. We almost saw it a few years ago with LSU. I really wanted to see this scenario play out. We didn't necessarily get to see it play out. But remember, LSU won the national championship in 2019. The following season, they were supposed to have Derek Stingley, Jamar Chase back. Jamar Chase opted out. They actually had a few guys opt out, and they lost an excess amount of guys to the NFL. So Michigan in a situation where lose a lot of starters, lose a lot of key guys to a national championship team, including the quarterback, but they do have Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, three true difference makers. And I think, and you can really say that wholeheartedly because these are all three guys that are the number one player at their respected position for next year's draft. So Colston Loveland, Will Johnson, Mason Graham, key true difference makers back for Michigan football. Heaven forbid none of these guys gets hurt. I think that would be the scenario that if the season really were to collapse. Obviously, you don't always want to think worst case. If the season really collapsed, you could really boil it down. You could really say it would be in a case where one of these guys gets hurt. So hopefully they stay healthy. Yeah, Loveland, such a phenomenal player. Will Johnson, such a phenomenal player. They might play Will Johnson both ways. We'll see how that goes, though. But, yeah, Will Johnson has a chance to be one of the best corners to play at Michigan. Right up there, Charles Woodson, I think, would get the claim. Not even I think. Charles Woodson would be the guy the consensus top cornerback in Michigan football history, but Will Johnson, another season like he had these past couple seasons, and he's right there. So you could argue Will Johnson is. I would say you could say that you could already make the claim that Will Johnson is the second best cornerback in Michigan football history. Now that is debatable, but it's a season like if Will Johnson follows up a season this year like the last two, I think it's really hard to not. It's really hard to not say that definitively that he's the best corner in Michigan history. I think, if he takes a step back this year, then I think there's an argument that, he's probably only he's a top 5 all-time corner, but maybe not the best. But a season like 2022, a season like 2023, and you can make a case he's the best cornerback in Michigan football history, even ahead of Charles Woodson. But yeah, Michigan football, Wink Martindale, now the defensive coordinator. I didn't necessarily love this hire, but I think Martindale, I think he'll be good. It was one of those hires where I was just kind of like, that's an okay hire. I didn't love it. I mean, it's all right. But yeah, I think Martindale, I think Michigan's thinking was we can't really get a home run hire here, but let's get a guy who's got some NFL experience, can bring kind of that, will help us in recruiting with an NFL guy. So I think that was their thinking with Wink Martindale. And then, yeah, I mean, the main question for Michigan is who's going to be quarterback. Alex, I think Orji wins the job. I don't know. They do have Tuttle back. I really get a feel that Orji's going to be the guy. I don't know what it is. To me, like it could be like what we see. Like I think sometimes you have to when you are evaluating guys, like when you're trying to predict. Because that's what a lot of scouting is, predicting the future. When you're trying to predict the future, a lot of times you have to go with what you know definitively. And what we saw from Alex Orji is the guy's an athlete. He's bulked up at Michigan. He's a good runner. They brought him in for running situations. You saw his ability in the open field. I mean, he's got bursts. So those are some. So what we know is the coaching staff trusts him at least to a degree to put him in a big game against Ohio State, and we know that he has some running ability. So those things we know about Alex Orji. So I think that's why if you're gonna guess, if you're gonna predict who the guy is, I think that's why you would say Alex Orji, just because knowing what we know, he's got some coaching trust, and we've seen his running ability. So those are a couple of things we know about Alex Orji to make us predict that he would most likely going to be the starting quarterback for Michigan next year. Now, you never know. Maybe Jaden Davis knocks it out of the park in fall camp. Maybe Jack Tuttle has a really good fall camp. I think it's good that Jack Tuttle's still there, though, because you never know. I mean, this guy that experienced at Indiana, played a little bit last year. So, yeah, I mean, don't count out Jack Tuttle. Don't count out Jaden Davis. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see just kind of how things unfold. But I think Alex Orji will be the guy at quarterback. Running back will be interesting. A name to watch is Cole Cabana. And this might be a little bit of my bias because I watched Cole Cabana in high school. I mean, this dude has legitimate speed. He redshirted this past season, got in a game or two. But he's a guy to watch just because he has legitimate speed. And I think he's better than then I would say he's got a chance to beat out Benjamin Hall, Khalil Mullings, the guys that are listed 2 and 3 in the depth chart. But, yeah, I mean, just talk about, you talk about a pivotal year for a guy on the Michigan. If you talk about a guy who really wants to stake his claim as far as the NFL draft is concerned, a guy that is a pivotal year for him, a bounce back year, however way you want to put it, it's Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards took a step back last year. It was interesting going into this season. Some people had Donovan Edwards as the number 1 running back for the 2024 NFL draft. Took a step back. If he would have declared, who knows where he would have went? Maybe 5th, 6th round. I think he probably would have, who knows? It's really hard to say, but I think he still would have been drafted just because I think NFL teams would have looked at his, size, stature, and just his ability as a receiver. But yeah, Donovan Edwards, pivotal season for him to kind of stake his claim as one of the top running backs in the country, be productive, show that he can be the guy as the number 1 guy, as the RB1. So yeah, and then continue to show his outstanding receiving skills and just the speed he has in the open field. So yeah, Donovan Edwards, big season for him, not just relative to his NFL draft standing, but big season for him just because he'll make an impact for this Michigan football team, a team that I assume now no Jim Harbaugh head coach, but I assume they're going to want to run the ball very often. Some games, who knows, this could be another 70-30 run-to-pass ratio. So when you're running the ball 70-80% of the snaps, you're going to want your RB1 to have his best season, be ready, be fully healthy. So, yeah, Michigan really counting on Donovan Edwards to have a really good season. Receiver, Frederick Moore, Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris. Michigan's got some guys, I think. What's cool, Michigan's really, the way they've built their offense, such a strong offensive line in a running game, when you build it this way, you don't really need necessarily an elite receiver. It's kind of fun, I guess, if you want to play the what if game. It's kind of fun to play, like, what if Michigan had Worthy this year? Obviously, they still win a national championship without him. That's something we do know. But how much better would this offense have been even with Xavier Worthy? So, yeah. Does Michigan, I think you could be you could say maybe Michigan handles Alabama. Maybe not handles them, but they, beat that. It doesn't come down to, the wire per se. Do they put up more points in that game? So, obviously they still beat Alabama, but, was that with Xavier Worthy, were some of these a few closer games like Penn State, is that not close? Do they close the deal early? Do they put up more points? So that's the big what if is what if they had a guy like Xavier Worthy. But yeah, Samaj Morgan could be that guy. Just a true freshman last year. He's got a chance to have a breakout season this year and maybe become that elite receiver. He showed certainly some ability to do so. We'll just have to see if he takes the next step. But yeah, Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris, Frederick Moore. On the offensive line, El Hadi. El Hadi was a guy that played some snaps, last year. He's a guy I like. So yeah, Michigan should be strong in the offensive line too. And then Miles Hinton too, another guy that played. He was a former transfer from Stanford, played some snaps last year. So yeah, El Hadi, Miles Hinton. They do have some talent on the offensive line. Look, they do lose, even though they do lose some guys. Um, Zach Zenner, Ladarius Henderson. They lose some guys, but this Michigan offensive line should be fine. They should be all right. Defensively, Kenneth Grant, big presence inside. Rashawn Benny, a guy that's been good in the rotation. Jay Sean Barnum too. They got the transfer linebacker from Maryland, which is a nice move. And then Josiah Stewart back. Quietly, it's interesting with Michigan. Even though they lost a lot of key guys on defense, Junior Colson, Braden McGregor. They lost some key guys. They quietly have a lot of guys back, like Josiah Stewart, really nice player, transferred from Coastal Carolina. He did some nice things this year and played meaningful snaps. Played well in the Washington game and the Alabama game. Played well in big moments. So, and then getting Jay Sean Barnum was key. Losing the incoming freshman from Belleville, the linebacker hurts. His name escapes me at the moment. But that hurts. But Barnum and then Ernest Hausman too. So Michigan in the due to the transfer portal should be fine at linebacker this year, even though they do lose Michael Barrett and Junior Colson. So Jay Sean Barnum coming over from Maryland, and then they still have Ernest Hausman. Hausman, played all right for him. Safety position are going to be really good. They have I'm blanking out right now. But both safeties are back. Makari Page and why is there other safety's name escaping me? But they should be fine. Should be fine there. Kind of maybe my laptop. Sometimes I'm kind of just doing these. I'm just trying to remember a lot of these guys. A lot of this is off the top of my head. I don't remember. I can't remember. Most years, like by about the middle of the season, I can remember the full starters and about the full 2 deep, but sometimes I need to pull up my computer to remember, so I'm going to grab that real quick. So here we go. And then Amarion Walker, he was a highly recruited guy. Amarion Stewart. That's going back to receiver. Defensively. Derek Moore too, another guy. Did they lose that? Who? What was that safety they had? Why can't I remember his name? Did they lose him? What happened to him? Jair Hill. Jair Hill. There's a highly recruited guy, redshirted this year. They're going to need him to play well at corner. Quentin Johnson projected to be the other safety. I really like Makari Page. It's strong. Eno Etta, too. He redshirted this past year. They're going to need him to play well at edge rusher. Rashawn Benny projected to start at defensive end. He could play D end, D tackle. Josiah Stewart going to be the left outside linebacker, and then like a rush outside linebacker, Derek Moore. what happened to that one safety? Why does his name escape me? Jeremiah Beasley was the linebacker that transferred. Luke Hamilton, that was here's the spring roster. Yeah, it's interesting. Beasley on the roster for the spring, and then just recently, like a week or two ago, decided to transfer to Missouri. But yeah, kind of keep talking. So yeah, I mean, with Michigan, obviously, how was life after Jim Harbaugh? That's the huge question with Michigan. I think I've kind of talked about this before. I think with Michigan, I don't think where how the program will be is going to be something that we will get the answer to like 2 or 3 years from now. Like I think next year we'll find out a lot about Michigan, but I think it's going to be 2-3 years from now we really find out the most about Michigan and kind of like where this program's headed. If you notice, after a good coach leaves, a lot of times a lot of their system is still in place. A lot of guys still remember the culture from a year or two prior, so things can kind of keep rolling. But you look 2, 3 years later, that's when kind of things can kind of start to unwind. It's like when Jim Harbaugh left Stanford, David Shaw kind of sustained a good program at Stanford, but then you just saw slowly the recruiting started to dip. You started to have a few bad seasons. And once you kind of take that dip after you've sustained success, it's kind of hard to get back rolling. It's just kind of like I don't know I'm trying to think of an analogy for it. It's just kind of like you got a ball. It's like a ball that starts to, or I don't know. I can't really think of an analogy for it, but it's just kind of like the moment, like once the ball stops bouncing or stops rolling, then it's kind of hard to regain that momentum. So. But yeah, I mean, the schedule going to be brutal for Michigan. Oregon, USC, some big names on the schedule. Texas, big games at home too. USC, Texas. I think that's cool that they get those games at home, especially Texas at home early too. I think that's going to be key. Washington, Oregon. Who would have thought Michigan? A few years ago, when a lot of these non-conference games were still pretty hyped up, who would have thought we'd get a season where Michigan plays Oregon, USC, Washington, Texas? Like, I mean, you talk about like a dream season. Like, this is something like in a video game you could make. Like in NCAA football, you could create your own schedule. This was like kind of what people dream of, creating a very tough dream schedule. Teams from the West Coast and everywhere. So Texas, Michigan, going to be a heavily watched game just because it's two traditional powers, two big-time names. So, yeah, that's going to be – I think that's the Fox big noon game. And then I think Michigan, USC, I think is CBS, which is interesting too. That'll be – I kind of like that too. Gary Danielson, Brad Nessler on the call. I like when Brad Nessler calls the game. So, yeah, I think Michigan, USC, CBS. And then it looks like Michigan, Texas will be the Fox big noon. I'm sure that's going to be – huge viewership. College Game Day, I assume, will probably be there. So, but yeah, a lot to look forward to early in the college football season, and especially week 2 when Texas rolls into Ann Arbor. And Quinn Ewers, too. Seeing Quinn Ewers. I'm happy. I thought Quinn Ewers maybe heading into the draft, but he chose to come back. So, yeah, Quinn Ewers Quinn Ewers, really talented guy. It would be interesting to see how Quinn Ewers does this season, how much he improves his draft stock. Is he going to be talked about as one of the top quarterbacks in the nation? But yeah, really good player nonetheless. So, yeah, guys, I'm going to wrap with that. Thanks for tuning into the Brant Marshall Show. Stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Thanks for tuning in to this preview.